Okay, so the last chapter for today is about data frames. Data frames are the most common way of handling and manipulating data in R. They're very convenient because they basically allow us to work with different data types like characters, factors, logicals, or numeric variables in one matrix. So if you already have a matrix, let's say the matrix that we used to work with before, and you just want to turn it into a data frame, you just call the function as data frame on the matrix B and assign it to a new value, to a new object. And as you can see here, it will just take the values as before, and it will just label them as variable 1 and variable 2. If you want to create a new data frame from scratch by combining different vectors or matrices that have, important is just that they have the corresponding or matching dimensions, you call the function data frame, and then you just list inside all the matrices that you would like to combine. And here we see that the first vector is here the first column, and then the rest is the matrix that we worked with before. Very often we would like to actually work, or basically the main task of data manipulation is usually that we would like to create new variables in our data set, or manipulate variables, or change classes or something like this. And this is all possible within the data frame itself. So let's look at an example in RStudio directly. So here I have before created a little toy data set called wages, and we could just call this, and it is displayed. And let's say we would like to just work with one particular column in this data set. Let's say we would only want to work with schooling. So the way to do this is to call wages, a $sign, and then we can select which column we would like to have. So let's say we want to work with schooling. This gives us exclusively these three values from schooling. If you would like to create a new column, so a column that doesn't exist yet, we can do this similarly. Let's just type this in the script. So this is something that we could do again later. Let's say we type wages, and now we would actually like to have a variable that combines, let's say, the years of schooling and the years of experience as human capital. So we just type human capital. That's going to be the name of our new variable. And then we assign it the summation of schooling and experience. Let's run this. Now let's call this dataset again. Now we see we've created an additional column called human capital. And the value here is just the result of adding together schooling and experience. Similarly, we could also just transform a already existing variable. Let's say we don't actually want to have wages, but instead we would like to have log wages. So let's create a new additional variable. Let's call it wages log wage. Then we call the log on wages wage. Execute this, and now we have an additional column with log wage. So here you see another example where we do this with experience squared. Whatever transformation you would want, you can just append this as an extra column. Very useful to view the data set is the function structure. So the example I just showed you, it only had 3 observations, so it was very easy to look at the entire data set. However, in practice, we will have thousands of observations and probably hundreds or even thousands of variables. So if you just look at the data set, it will not be a very convenient way of looking at, of trying to figure out what you're working with, because it will just go on listing observations, and it will be impossible to actually to read this. So instead, you would like to have a functional like structure that gives you a brief summary of what you're working with. So here we see that we have 3 observations, 5 variables, and then a list of all the variables that are available, their data type, and then some examples of observations. Very commonly, we have data that is in the wrong format. So for example, we have something that comes in a string, but we'd like to have it as a numeric, or something that is numeric, we'd like to have as a factor. We can do this within data frames as well. So let's just do this. So let's say let's first take a look, structure wages. So that's what we have looked at before. And we see, for example, here that we have only 2 values for experience, say. And we would like to have, maybe we want to have just this as a factor. Like we would like to look at people differently with 8 years of experience and 11 years, who knows. What we can do then is we call wages, call experience, and then we just say that experience itself should now be as a factor. Call experience again. Let's look at the structure again. Now, if we just look at the structure of wages and experience, we see that it's now a factor with 2 levels, level 8 and level 11, but these are coded as values 1 and 2. So it will not be 8 and 11 anymore. It will just be turned into codes instead. The function, so as factor can be used if you already have the variable that you want to convert. However, sometimes you might want to have more control, and then you can use the factor function. And here is an example from a data set that contains data on extramarital affairs. And here people have rated their happiness in their relationship on a scale from 1 to 5. And you can see if you look at the structure, marital rating is an integer. So if you just run a regression using this will be interpreted as a numeric value. But obviously, like a scale doesn't have any quantitative interpretation. Like going from 1 to 2 doesn't mean that you're twice as happy. It just means you're more happy. So therefore, we would like to turn this into a factor. There's an obvious application where we would really want to change the data type of this variable. But since it's a scale, we would also like to tell R that this is ordered. So what we do is we call factor, tell it which variable to use, and then we supply it with a vector of the different levels that are possible. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we tell that this is ordered. And the result will be a factor where R already knows here that 2 is higher than 1 and 3 is higher than 2, but not in a numeric way, but rather just as a rating. Last but not least, very important is how to subset data frames. Because now that before we worked with vector, and there it just had one dimension, and we could just pick the entries that we liked. Here it works the same way, just the difference is that we have two dimensions. We need to tell if you're subsetting which observations, which rows, and which variables as in which columns. So for example, you can do this just numerically. You can just say, give me from my data frame here, give me the first observation and the first row and the third column. But we can also do use logical operators like before. So let's say that we would like to, let's go back to, for example, let's say we would like to have everybody, just the observations of people with more than 10 years of schooling. So we would call wages. We would open the square brackets, and then we would supply it with a logical operator that says wages schooling needs to be larger than 10. And this is only the first input, but we also need to select the rows. We also need to tell which columns. Let's say we want all the columns. What we do is we just leave this empty. Running this gives us now two observations with both have 13 years of schooling, so the selection has worked out correctly, and we got all the variables. Of course, we could also only we can only, for example, also select only one variable. So let's say we only care about wage. So what we do is we call this again, but then we say we only would like to have the first column. Let's just type in 1. And now we just get the first wage of the person with more than 10 years of experience and the wage of the second person with more than 10 years of experience. Okay, so data frames are very important. You should get comfortable with selecting data and subsetting it, creating new variables, because this will be basically every assignment from now on will involve you doing a lot of data work. So this is very important to get your hands on some practice with that. That's it for today. Thank you very much.